Happy Monday, listeners. For Science Quickly, this is Rachel Feltman, here to give you your weekly news roundup. I hope you're staying cool if it's finally summer wherever you're listening from, but if you need a little help with that, you'll definitely want to tune in again on Wednesday. But for now, let's kick off the week by diving into some of the stories you may have missed. Last Wednesday, scientists published a small study with some pretty big implications. They found microplastics in 4 out of the 5 penis tissue samples that they studied. And yeah, 5 is a pretty small sample size. Like I said, this was a tiny study. But 4 out of 5, we don't love those odds, even at that scale. Plus, this comes just a few weeks after a different study detected microplastics in human and dog testicles. They tested 23 human samples and 47 dog specimens, and every single one contained microplastics. So again, we're not loving these odds. In both cases, researchers sounded the alarm on a potential link between microplastics and various sexual health concerns. While neither study showed a causal link, which is to say it's too soon to blame microplastics for any particular health problem, the research on penis tissues specifically looked at men who came to the hospital for surgery to treat erectile dysfunction. So we know that all of the study subjects were struggling with that issue. And in the study from back in May, researchers noted that the dogs with higher concentrations of certain microplastics had lower sperm counts. Some recent studies have suggested that human sperm quality is on the decline, though others have reported mixed results or even a general increase in sperm quality. Experts say that's a really tricky thing to pin down at the population level, and the dropping fertility rate could just as easily be blamed on people choosing to have fewer kids or to start trying for them later in life. But just because we're not sure that sperm quality is spiraling doesn't mean it's no big deal to find microplastics in our reproductive organs. Microplastics are tiny particles of, you guessed it, plastic. Some of them are made really small on purpose. Like, remember those chunky little beads that used to be in all the exfoliating face washes back in the day? But others come about because plastic takes decades or even centuries to decompose, but even then it doesn't fully go away. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. Given that humans produce about 400 million metric tons of plastic waste every single year, it's not surprising that these bits and bobs show up in a lot of places. But it's recently become apparent that they show up everywhere, like literally everywhere. Microplastics have turned up in Antarctic snow, in the clouds above Mount Fuji, inside the stomachs of deep-sea creatures, and near the top of Mount Everest. Microplastics have also been found in lots of human tissues, including blood and breast milk. While we're still not sure exactly how these particles impact us, the preliminary research is not great. One recent study looked at plaques that had been surgically removed from the carotid arteries of 304 people and found microplastics in about half of them. In a 34-month follow-up, patients with the microplastics in their plaques had a 4 times higher rate of heart attack, stroke, and death. Another study found a correlation between microplastics in feces and inflammatory bowel disease. It's clear we've got to tackle this problem, and I'm starting to suspect that future humans will talk about plastic takeout containers the same way we now talk about folks wearing lead face paint. Governments are taking action, but it's slow going. For example, California has enacted legislation that's considered pretty ambitious, but it still just aims to cut plastic packaging by 25% over the course of 10 years. So what can you do right now, other than calling your elected officials and telling them you don't actually want microplastics in your penis, please and thank you? Which, by the way, you should definitely do that. Call your elected officials. Researchers think that avoiding plastic food and beverage packaging can go a long way. You should also definitely stop microwaving food in plastic. It may not protect you from all the microplastic in the world because, as I said before, there's microplastic literally everywhere. But it should at least lower the amount of plastic you personally have in your poop on a daily basis, and that's not nothing. Speaking of poop, with the Summer Olympics quickly approaching, new test results revealed that the Seine River contained unsafe levels of E. coli and other microbes in early June. The report was published by a monitoring group called Eau de Paris, and you might wonder why we care about E. coli levels in the Seine River. But this report came out just one day after an International Olympic Committee executive claimed there were, quote, no reasons to doubt that marathon and triathlon swimmers could race in the river. We're actually working on a more in-depth story about efforts to clean up the Seine in time for the games, so keep an eye out for that episode in your feed next month. Remember Boeing's Starliner spacecraft? That's the one that had a delayed launch because of a helium leak and then a rocket issue. Well, it did finally make its way to the International Space Station earlier this month. The journey wasn't exactly smooth sailing. Thankfully, the craft safely carried veteran NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams to the ISS. But it also experienced 4 more helium leaks. And since heading to space, 5 of its 28 maneuvering thrusters have experienced failures. Now Boeing and NASA officials have announced that the astronauts' visit, which was supposed to last about a week, is getting stretched a little longer. Their earliest possible return date is now set for this Wednesday. NASA reps have said that they do expect the vehicle to be able to get the 2 astronauts home safely, but they want to take their time studying the problems now. The issues happened in the Starliner's service module, and that component is going to be jettisoned as the spacecraft returns to Earth. So now is the time for them to tinker with this stuff. We'll wrap up with a study from last week that jumped out at me as being kind of hopeful? Wild, I know. Last Thursday, researchers shared their findings on how the rhesus macaques of Cayo Santiago, also known as Monkey Island, fared in the wake of Hurricane Maria. In addition to killing about 3,000 people throughout Puerto Rico, the storm destroyed 63% of the vegetation on Cayo Santiago. Tree cover remains scarce even now, which poses a problem for local macaques searching for protection from the hot sun. But researchers say that while the storm's damage does seem to have radically altered how the monkeys live, those changes aren't necessarily bad. The study's authors say macaques are generally thought of as aggressive, competitive animals. But their data shows that in the time since Hurricane Maria, the monkeys willing to cooperate and share space in the shade have been more likely to survive. Researchers are now seeing more social behavior from the population, even beyond the moments when the monkeys are crowded together for shade. It really sounds like we could learn a thing or two about climate resilience and cooperation from these distant cousins of ours. In other words, the world needs more monkey business. I've been saying this for years. That's all for this week's Science News Roundup. Tune in on Wednesday to learn how to handle the ever-increasing heat of summer. And don't forget to join us on Friday for the latest episode of our ongoing audio adventure in Antarctica. Before you go, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the show. How do you like the new episode formats? Do you have any stories or subjects you'd like us to investigate? Get in touch with us at sciencequickly@sciam.com. You can also leave us a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We really appreciate the feedback. Science Quickly is produced by me, Rachel Feltman, along with Fonda Mwangi, Kelso Harper, Corinne Leong, and DelViscio. Elah Feder, Alexa Lim, Madison Goldberg, and Anaissa Ruiz Tejada edit our show, with fact-checking from Shayna Posses and Shattuck. Our theme music was composed by Dominic Smith. Subscribe to Scientific American for more up-to-date and in-depth science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Rachel Feltman. Have a great week.